So while we're just sitting here, why don't we just take a minute to temporarily set aside some things that may be occupying our mind. So let's, and we can pick them up later if you choose, but for right now, let's just for a few minutes here, we'll just set them aside and see what's left. So let's see if we set aside any problems that we might be carrying from the day. We're not trying to deny them, we're not trying to solve them, we're just going to set them gently aside. So we can do that also with any anxieties that we might be carrying. Might also set aside any regrets about the past, any sense of things left undone. Set aside any guilt that we may be carrying about any event in the past, some action that we may have taken or not taken. You can also set aside any beliefs that we might have, even the really good ones. Might set aside any hopes. Any desires in this moment for things to be other than they are at this precise moment. We can set aside any ambitions. Right? Even the ambition to get enlightened. We can set aside any what ifs. Any fear. Any demands for anything to be different in this moment than as they are. We can set aside any concepts. Any concepts about who we are, our place in the world situation, world problems. Again, we're not denying anything here. We're just gently setting aside things that aren't going to be resolved in this moment. So we can just set them aside and see what remains when we're not preoccupied about things that aren't existing in this exact moment. So we can also let go of any definitions that we may be carrying about ourselves in terms of who we are, our profession, our relationship status, our age, our health, our wealth, where we live, what kind of car we drive. What our name is. what relationships I have with other people, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, sister. Again, we're not denying anything. We're just saying in this moment, none of that defines what exists in this precise moment. Okay, I'm sure I've forgotten a few defining characteristics, so we can set those aside too. Anything that feels like it's still tugging at your identity, set that aside too. And what's remarkable is that even without any of that, we're still here. We're still alive, still breathing, still sitting in the room. So whatever we set aside wasn't essentially who we are. None of it. You know, it may be relatively true that we're mother, father, son, daughter, brother, sister, etc., that we have a profession, that we have an age, all of that, certainly on a relative human scale, sure, yeah. But on a deeper level, we can notice that all of those defining characteristics, any way we may define ourselves, any self-limiting beliefs about ourselves, we can set those aside, not hold them in active consciousness for a few moments, and yet here we are, still here. So whatever we are essentially isn't defined by any of that. It's who we are. So the sense in this moment of just the felt sense of being here in this moment, alive, conscious, it's not dependent. It's who we are. It's not something that we have to attain. We just have to set aside everything else, and there it is. We don't have to fabricate it. We don't have to imagine it. We don't have to believe it or not believe it. It's not actually subject to our belief or disbelief. We can choose to ignore it, sure. It's not something that we attain. It's something that we discover, much like we just did, discover what remains when we're not actively recompiling our existence moment to moment. When we're not actively defining ourselves in all the ways that we define ourselves in a fast enough way to make it feel like it's a continuous whole. When we can just set that aside for even for just a few minutes like we're doing now, we can see that what remains is still present, it's still alive, still aware. and we haven't attained anything. And yet, if we can settle into this sense of awareness, I mean, in your own direct experience right now, is there a sense of completeness there? Does it feel like it lacks anything, that simple presence? Does it feel at peace? So we can just sense into that, notice that, just that ever-present quality. Whenever we just choose to redirect our attention, not forcefully, but just gently come back and see, I wonder if that simple sense of beingness, I wonder if that's still there now, about now when I'm walking over to the kitchen or walking out to my car or sitting in my easy chair in the morning. I wonder about now, how about now? Just come back to that simple sense of presence, aliveness, beingness. And we might notice that even while there may be thought happening or memories happening, storyline happening, problem solving happening, even while that's happening, there we can begin to sense that yes, and still, even while all that's happening, there's still the same presence. Now being attentive to problem solving or thinking or whatever. But that presence actually isn't absent. So we can choose to just notice it but notice it actually without any demands on it. Like, not even the demand, oh, I want it to be more exciting, I want it to be more blissful. Just meet it on its own terms. It will more and more fully reveal itself. But it knows what it's doing. You don't have to demand it. You don't have to try to manage it. Actually, the less you try to manage it or control it or direct it or improve it, the better. Just allow it to be. It is actually what we are. So it's just sensing into that prior to any mental effort for it to be different than that. So just that, just rest in that spaciousness. Okay. Everybody good? I thought what we could talk about tonight is conditioning. And I know we've talked about it from time to time in the past, but it's always good to come back to that because it has a habit, so to speak, of coming back into causing difficulties in our life. Right. So it can cause us difficulty in that for one thing, it consumes energy, consumes time and energy to deal with whatever conditioning is causing discomfort, a sense of being out of alignment, some sense of suffering, causes us, to just spend our life energy dealing with it. Okay, so it can also act as a anchor, right? Where we are exploring some, let's say, deeper states of being, and the conditioning can often come back in and say, what about me? Don't you have to resolve this problem first before you worry about something that doesn't appear to have any practical value at all? Look at me, look at me. So it can have that sort of gravitational pull to pull us back from, exploring our deeper nature. So that's the importance of conditioning, and that's how sticky it can be. So I like to think of conditioning in some sense very analogous to a computer, right? So the hardware in this case could be our body at birth, more or less a clean slate. There's some genetic conditioning happening, maybe some spillover tendencies from prior life, karma, who knows. But it's a relatively clean slate, sort of like taking, your brand new laptop out of the box. It's got a few programs on it, but, just a few basic programs. And then you add all the other programs in on top of it. So the computer itself is the hardware. So we could say the genetic birthed body mind. And then there's the software, the programming that's added in later. In the case of, us humans, it's all added right from the get-go, certainly some before birth even, and then it picks up pace after that in terms of what we're conditioned with. So, going back to the computer analogy, we load different software programs on that. Software programs that are functional are useful, right? They have the ability to do what we intend them to do. When we activate that particular program, we get a result. Great, it's helpful. But the programs where they sort of have a mind of their own and do things that we don't really want them to do, in computer terms, we could say, well, there's, they're buggy programs, or and then in terms of our own conditioning, we could just say, well, it's dysfunctional conditioning. It's not actually good or bad, right? We don't have to get into that terminology. But I think the way to look at it is really, is that particular conditioning in my own life, does that yield the results that I'd like it to yield in that area? Or does it feel like it's a difficult form of conditioning where it feels like it gets in the way of who I know I am, who I would like to be, who I would feel like I would be if I was could be more authentic, but this conditioning is holding me back. That sense of just almost looking through a clouded window where, we can't quite get a good view of the outside world. We're sort of held back from fully interacting up to what we are certain are our capabilities to interact more fully with the world, more authentically. Okay, so it's good to notice that the original hardware, right, the computer out of the box, isn't isn't good or bad or anything, and the programs that are loaded in also are not good or bad or right or wrong. They're just they're just what's there, just what happened to get loaded on to, in this case, the organism. So it's good to notice that a lot of the conditioning is functional, right? So among conditioning that's just about everybody would say was useful is conditioning like learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to write, learning how to drive a car, operate a computer. Um, all of these are forms of conditioning. They're things that we didn't know at birth how to do. When we were learning how to walk, if you watch you know, a 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old trying to learn how to walk, there's every bit of their attention on just taking that next step. And I mean, that's how difficult that program was to load onto this organism. And then once we, you know, with a lot of effort, over some period of time, we became more and more skilled at that particular form of conditioning, to the point that we didn't have to use our conscious minds while it was happening. We could sort of relegate it to the body's knowledge of how to do that. So now when we get up and walk across the room, we don't think, how am I going to put that next foot in front of the other one? You know, we can be thinking about something else entirely and still get ourselves across the room. I once knew someone who was, this always amazed me. She was a legal secretary, and she was a very good typist, and what was surprising was that she could type legal documents and carry on a conversation with you at the same time. So that conditioning in her case was so so clear, so advanced in a way that she could see the words, you know, the handwritten notes, and it was translated directly into finger movements, and it just freed her conscious mind up to have a conversation. So, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. The more we do something, you know, I'm guessing, although I'm not a musician, I'm guessing musicians have that sense also, that they're that it drops out of their conscious thinking mind into something deeper, allowing a greater, deeper form of expression to come through. So a lot of conditioning is perfectly fine. So sometimes you'll hear people talk, well, I just want to get rid of all my conditioning. No, you don't want to do that. You know, a lot of the conditioning is really useful. But then there's that other conditioning, right? You know, the ones that sort of sticky, the ones that cause us to fall into states that we don't enjoy, that aren't fruitful, that aren't in alignment with our, you know, our deeper desires to, let's say, connect with people, to express our love and gratitude to other people. And then sometimes this conditioning gets in the way of that. You know, conditioning like, you know, wanting to be right, wanting to know, you know, wanting to be certain, you know, and then, you know, when we don't, you know, get what we want, the conditioning says, well, the appropriate response is anger, or, you know, frustration, or withdrawal, or belligerence, or whatever it is. I mean, so that's the program that's run. That's the software that runs when that key is hit. That's the software that runs. So it's not that difficult to notice, and we probably all have a pretty good sense of what aspects of our own conditioning are, let's just say, again, not good or bad, right? but in fruitful or not so fruitful, functional, not so functional. You know, in alignment with what we truly, how we would truly like to express ourselves in this life, not so much, right? So we can see that if there's a certain patterning, a certain programming that's not resulting in the outcome that we really want, that's the area that we're talking about. So the typical solution here is, well, you know, you have a habit, you have a program, you have a patterning that you don't like. Just you know, just tough it out. You know, more willpower. The only problem with that is that it well, it doesn't work very well. I mean, you can sort of do it. You know, if you apply, maybe you apply enough attention and energy and, you know, can-do attitude and, you know, the right self-help guru, and, you know, maybe you can sort of, you know, fix a habit in a particular area. But the chances are that there's something underneath that habit that's supporting it, that's actually a deeper cause for it to remain in place. And that deeper cause, if we fix something here just on a more superficial level, that deeper cause can migrate into, you know, another patterning. You know, an example might be, you know, if someone, let's say, likes to be in control, and then they, you know, that gets pointed out to them, and they think, oh no, I shouldn't really do that. Then, you know, maybe it gets migrated over into frustration or anger or something, you know, where they're not, you know, being real conscious in the area of control, but not so conscious over here in the area of anger or frustration, etc. So one of the useful things to look at is, in this patterning, you know, what's the upside that's holding it in place? I mean, it's easy to look at, you know, the negative aspects, like my life would be better if, you know, if I didn't, you know, I felt more, I don't know, more confident, more friendly, more, you know, you know, I felt more at ease talking with people, just that simple kind of conditioning. But there might be, you know, something underneath it. There often is, where there's a positive payoff for us there as well. You know, I'd like to be more friendly, but actually I'm a pretty private person, and, you know, I don't really want to, you know, reveal myself in that way. I don't want to make myself vulnerable. I'd like to be friendly, yes, but at the same time, I'd really like to hang on to my, you know, privacy. You know, I don't want to put myself out and expose myself to potential harm, potential judgment. Okay, so often there's something, some positive payoff that's supporting that. So when we begin to look at the conditioning, and as we almost drop down through the layers, we can see different emotions may be supporting the more visible emotions. The issue comes in when we try to change our conditioning. You know, this is the self-improvement project. You know, so I'm going to try to change my conditioning. The issue with trying to change our conditioning is that we've immediately set up sort of a worthy opponent, right? I'm here, my conditioning's over there, and I'm going to try to change it. The difficulty is that, you know, we're trying to fix something using a, let's say, a faulty instrument, right? We're trying to fix our conditioning by using our own willpower, which is thoroughly enmeshed in our own conditioning, you know. So it's like trying to um, correct something with the tool that has caused the problem to start with. Um, so we can just see that. We can just see, okay, just by sheer willpower, which when we really try to apply it on conditioning, it's really deep and ingrained and problematic for us. When we try to apply it there, um, it, we often, get discouraged because it feels like we lack willpower, and then we get another judgment on ourselves, like, oh, I'm not strong enough to, break through that conditioning. So we can actually, by trying to, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and get out of our own conditioning, we can actually, fall into a greater degree of helplessness about it. Well, I've tried, I failed, and hey, I guess that's just who I am. I guess that's will be what I am, for the duration. I'll just have to make the best of it. I know it's inconvenient, but what can I do? I've tried, that kind of attitude. So what can we do then? If it feels like we're, living in a, let's just say a prison cell, and we've tried to get out, we can't quite get out, but well, at least we can decorate it nice, put up a few pictures, move the furniture around, make it a little more comfortable. Which is where most people are. They've just decided, well, that's who I am. I'll just get comfortable with it, But I suggest that there actually is a way beyond our conditioning that doesn't serve us. And that is to not oppose it. It doesn't mean you have to love it or, try to convince yourself it's really great after all. No, but just be willing to look at it clearly, to really see it, to see when it arises, what triggers its arising. Just those sort of poisonous emotions, the anger, the despair, the the envy, the greed, all those kinds of emotions. Just see when they arise, under what circumstances, what triggers it, what's happening in my head when I get triggered in that way. What's the belief that I'm holding about how things should be, or how the other person should act, or how I should have acted. All those judgmental beliefs, And we can look deeper. Is there anything deeper than that? Is there another emotion below that? Below that anger, is there fear? Is there insecurity? Is there uncertainty? And then sense into that. It's sort of like an archaeological expedition, just keep dropping down. Okay. And we can have the opportunity to really look at this throughout the day. It doesn't have to be, a timed, scheduled sitting meditation. The best time to do it is when we can feel those conditioned responses arising. Write that in there, look at it. And it's so easy to put the blame out there, but where it's all happening is in here, all of it. Every single bit of it. And when we willingly allow ourselves to consider the reality of exactly that, that the blame isn't out there. The cause of suffering is only ever here. When we can truly see that, it gives us a direction. It gives us an avenue to go down, to really explore, how is that happening? How is that emotion generated? By what thought process am I believing that generates that emotion? Okay, we're not trying to make it go away, notice. And we're also certainly not judging it, right? Those two things are critical. If we judge it in any way, like, okay, I'm just doing this because I want to get rid of it, that's actually not that helpful. Be much better to look at it with some curiosity, like, wow, this is an emotion that I've sensed many times in my life. I don't really know where it comes from. I don't know where it originated from. I don't even know why that pattern consistently comes up. That interchange with other people, why that consistently happens. I don't know. What is that? Just that genuine curiosity about it. So you're not running away from it. You're not judging it. You're not dismissing it. You're not trying to get rid of it. You don't have to like it or not like it. Just be willing to face it. There's something about awareness, bringing the light of consciousness to that pattern that has a disinfectant quality to it. It's the awareness that does all the work. You don't actually have to try to make the patterning go away. It's the awareness and our willingness to look without flinching, without judging, without running away, without being disgusted by it, without being frustrated by it. All of those sort of secondary responses. The whole trick is to just look at it clearly. Look at it objectively. Look at it as an object, not as me, right? We can see, oh, it's conditioned. It's how it was the software that I got downloaded somehow. Probably not even with my permission. Certainly not without my conscious permission. And here it is. And so we don't have to take it personally. We can just say, oh, that's something that happened along the way. And by the way, all of us are thoroughly conditioned. Different ways, of course, but thoroughly conditioned. And one day, hopefully, all of us will have a chance to just see that in shocking, full color reality. Oh my God, everything that comes out of my mouth, every decision, every action I've ever taken, I can trace back to conditioning, all of it. We can just see the mechanical nature of life in the dream state, where we believe that that's who we are. This whole package of conditioned beliefs, behaviors, concepts, ideas, storylines, hopes, dreams, etc. All of that package of conditioning, the whole thing arises out of conditioning, all of it. That when we see that, it is shocking. It's like, it's an oh my God moment. Like, And we can have that we can come upon that realization and and then react to it too. We think, oh no, I'm just a mechanical being, how awful, I guess I'll just live out this life and make the best of it. But it's actually, if we view it correctly, seeing the insanity of it is the first step to sanity. It's like, oh my God, everything that I thought I was is the result of conditioning, all of it, you know. And then, we can wonder, is there anything that's not subject to conditioning? Is there anything that I am that isn't subject to this morass of programming, patterning, um, or do I have to wade through that tangle one thing at a time and try to undo the enormous ball of twine? Or can I just step out of it and recognize, no, very much like we pointed out at the beginning, there is this sense of aliveness, awareness, presence that is already unconditioned. It's not subject to conditioning. So it's really the recognition of the unconditioned as is already that allows us to look back at the conditioning and see, yep, there it is. That's the way this body-mind conditioned got conditioned, and I can look out and see other body-minds got conditioned in different ways. Some you could say, well, I like that form of conditioning better than that form of conditioning. Okay, sure. Doesn't change the fact that in all cases, it was absorbed in innocence. Mostly functional, some varying percentage of non-functional, but all in innocence. We can look at even a person who's, relatively functional out in the world, but where did that functionality come from? What set of beliefs? What family situation? What economic situation? What nation? What friends? What circumstances? We can always trace it back to some prior conditioning. But if we see that whole package and are able to step back from it and notice that I'm still here and I can see this, giant ball of tangled twine over there, but I can see that, what I essentially am is not that. If what I essentially am is not that, it allows me to look at that with clarity, without flinching, without turning away, without trying to manipulate what I'm looking at, just to see it clearly. And there's something transformative about that. It may not happen overnight, but it's just the willingness to look deeply. But the important thing is to look non-judgmentally and not try to manipulate it, not try to make it go away, to just see it for what it is. Just seeing it is incredibly instructive. And that awareness is willing to look. That awareness that you are, that we've pointed to at the beginning, that awareness isn't at risk. It's already outside the whole conditioned possibility. It's of a different dimension. Doesn't have attributes in that sense, but it is willing. It is caring. It is. It is. You could say that level of intimacy is love. You could say it's divine love for this human form. That willingness to look. And it's just the willingness to look with curiosity, with depth, almost like a grandparent with a young grandchild, just caring, loving, not demanding. Those kind of grandparents. And just being willing to be with it and allow that conditioning to reveal itself. But by doing that, it's not seen as an enormous opponent. It's just seen for what it is. It's just conditioning, nothing more. As fearsome an opponent as it may appear to be, when we turn around and are willing to look at it, it's like our own shadow that we're running away from. And when we turn around and look at it, no, it's a shadow. It's okay. It's not. I'm not saying that it's an easy process. It may not be fun to look at the degree to which we've been conditioned. The consequences of that conditioning on ourselves and on people around us, for all the years up till now. That may not be easy to look at, but it's the looking at it that frees it. It's the looking at it that releases it. So normally when we think about me, I, myself, we sort of include all of that conditioning within what we're defining as me. And then we're looking out at the world, somehow expecting our sense of separation from the world to be resolved out there, be resolved by outside circumstances. If the situation out there was just more to my liking, then I'd feel more at ease in the world. But when we turn around and see that what we're defining as me is actually not that at all, the I am, is this sense of already unconditioned awareness, noticing this conditioning, which then becomes the object, not the subject any longer. What's actually looking is the awareness. It's not like, this little me looking at the outside world, and this little me is the I, the self. No, it's the awareness looking at the conditioning. That's fruitful. Right? Trying to resolve our conditioning in the outside world by changing circumstances, changing partners, changing, jobs. I'm not saying that never change partners or jobs or whatever, but I am saying that, if we're always looking to the outside to solve our issues, then it's all too easy to ignore what is here. And it's really here where the work can be done. What our responsibility is what we can control. We don't have responsibility for what we can't control, right? What we can control is not the conditioning itself, and certainly not events out in the world, but what we can control is how we respond to whatever arises. That we do have control over. We can learn to have control over that. Right? We can choose to, watch our programming to the extent that it's, we're not subordinate to it. So it might be like, let's say a person is prone to anger. Okay, it may be that, when we're asleep at the wheel, something triggers it, some outside event, we get angry, and we hold that anger for days, months. You hear about feuds in the Appalachians that are going on for generations, But the more aware that we're willing to become about the conditioning that we have, the shorter that interval is from when the trigger happens to when we realize, oh, okay, I chose to believe that in that moment, and it took me for a ride. Here it is 2 weeks later. I've spent 2 weeks of my life, with anger, circulating in this bloodstream. And I didn't have to. It's just all based on the thought about how things should be. So as we're able to see it more and more clearly, we come to see it more and more quickly, to the point where, some triggering situation might arise. It might be a momentary sort of flare up in the body, and you say, oh, yeah, okay, there it is. Okay, it's just conditioning, right? It's not what you are, okay? When we can see that, we can relax about it, which allows us to look at it more clearly, more compassionately, right? With more curiosity, with more understanding. Because it's not essentially who we are. So if it's not essentially who we are, we don't have to try to fix it. It will diminish over time, the sort of dysfunctional conditioning. It probably, very unlikely, will happen overnight, but it will happen. Maybe a year or two. You sort of look in the rearview mirror and just wonder, well, I used to be more like that, but not so much anymore. I wonder how that happened. It didn't happen by us trying to get rid of it, trying to oppose it. It happened by being willing to see it clearly, to really, dive into the muck. Yeah. Because we can't let go of what we don't understand. It's really seeing it clearly, seeing the mechanism of it, see it how it triggers, goes from trigger to thought to feeling to reaction. Seeing the pattern, seeing what holds the pattern in place, what other sets of beliefs hold that in place. I recognize its work, but it's also something that we can just integrate within the day. We don't have to go out of our way to look for it. It's just when we find those patterns, those reactions that aren't in alignment with who we really want to be. So when those patterns arise, that's the time to look at it. So it's something that can really be integrated, in our lives. It's not something that we, do once a week at some meditation event. just really integrate it in the life, in your own life. Okay, and at some point, what we discover is that um, the, the person that has identified themselves with this set of conditioning, um, it's that sense of ownership of the conditioning that tends to be eroded. The conditioning may still be there, but there's that sense of, oh, it's me, it's my conditioning. That's what gets eroded. And that is what holds the conditioning in place, right? That's who I am. I know I am, so I'm convinced in that situation, I'll act like that again. When we just see it's a mechanical function, when we can see that, we can forgive ourselves for it. Right? We didn't take it on consciously. We didn't decide at some point in our life, well, I think what I really want to do is be an angry person. It didn't happen. There was something that was, arose in our life from a whole host of circumstances and seemed a reasonable response. Maybe even was a reasonable response. And yet now we have maybe more clarity where we can step back and look at it from the perspective of the awareness that we are and see, yes, still conditioned body, but it's not essentially who I am. And then its power over how we act and think and behave in the world, its power over that diminishes over time because we're no longer feeding it with our opposition. We see it, we're willing to look at it, not run away from it, not judge it. The lack of opposition actually diminishes its power. It's surprising how it works.